Hi everyone, and welcome to our third videocast of the personality unit. Today we're going to be talking about two perspectives, the social cognitive and the humanistic. And I grouped these two together because they kind of shift away from what was the traditional view of personality according to psychoanalytic theory, which we talked about in kind of two separate ways, but two very important ways. So let's get started, right? The first one we're going to do is a social cognitive perspective, all right? Now, social cognitive perspective, right, is kind of a combination of the socio-cultural approach to psychology. Remember, it's got the whole world in his hands, right? So it's, that culture and group pressure and all of those things influence you. And cognitive, which is the thought process, right? It's this finger. And so what they do is they take those ideas and apply them to personality. So the key point here is that they think that our personalities are shaped by our interactions with others, that's the social part, and yourself, which is the cognitive part. So what you think and then how the environment influences you and how you influence the environment, okay? And, it's part of a cognitive behavioral approach to psychology, which a lot of times focuses on how humans think about society and stresses the importance of your thoughts and your perceptions in your actions. So the way that you think influences the way that you act, and then the environment either like validates it or invalidates it, and then you react based on the environment, and it's like an endless circle, round and round and round and round. Yeah, I know. Chloe is like, what are you doing? Okay, so Bandura's model, right, really focuses on a term called reciprocal determinism, okay? And if something is reciprocal, it means that it goes back and forth. Like if we have a reciprocal friendship, you and I are friends. I do things for you and you do things for me, right? So reciprocal determinism, okay, is the idea that your personality is developed based on this interaction, like I kind of already mentioned, of behavioral, cognitive, and environmental factors, okay? So let's say, for example, you have a behavior like choosing to do drugs or drink alcohol, right? So maybe the environment is that you grew up in a household where you have family members who use drugs, or maybe you hang out with peers who use drugs. So, that can influence you, right? And then maybe there's some personal things there. Maybe biologically, you're maybe more prone to addiction. Maybe you think that doing drugs will make you feel better or cooler, or you think it'll make you feel okay, maybe it makes you feel happy, and then that influences the behavior, and then you do the drugs, and then you do feel better, and then, so it kind of goes around and around, all right? So reciprocal determinism and this behavioral, cognitive, environmental idea is kind of based on three things. So the first one is people choose different environments. So everyone has a choice on who they hang out with, and who you hang out with shapes you. So you shape your friends and your friends shape you, right? Different personalities shape how we interpret events. So for example, the personal factors such as having more anxiety or being more or less fearful or being more or less shy or open, right, might interpret how you see something. As an anxious person, you would see something as more threatening than a non-anxious. And lastly, you create situations by how you react. So a lot of times we always think that like, oh, well, the situation happened and then my reaction. But actually, sometimes it doesn't go that way. Sometimes if you expect a certain situation to happen, you can actually create it by your own actions. So for example, if you expect someone to be angry or to treat you poorly, like, oh, they don't like me, whatever, then you might be sassy to them or like give them a hard time, and then that might actually make them angry or treat you poorly. So it's like all in a circle. Everything impacts everything else. Okay. So a big part of this social cognitive perspective is the social part, the environmental part, but the other part is the cognitive part. And this is your personal experience, right? It's this part of the triangle. Let's see if I can get it to go back. I don't know why the slide's being weird. But anyways, it's that bottom part of the triangle, the personality, right? So what they find is that people develop what's called an expectancy. And this is what a person expects from a situation or your behavior. So for example, you do something and it'll turn out a certain way, right? It's usually based on something in the past, and actual feedback could change it. So for example, if you said hi to people and they always smiled and said hi back, you would expect that to happen. But then if you said hi to someone and they were like, what's your problem? Then you might get worried and think that that could happen in the future, right? And two very common expectancies that humans have are, the first one is called self-efficacy. So this is the expectancy that your effort will be successful and your belief that you're capable of doing it. So if you have a high self-efficacy, there's an expectancy that you can do something. Sorry, I don't know what's up with this. And if you have a low self-efficacy, it's really the idea that you probably don't believe that you can do it, right? The other common expectancy is locus of control. And this is the expectancy of how much control you'll have over your life and the situation you're encountering. So internal means that you believe you can control your own fate, you're in charge, you can control what happens. External generally believes like, oh, it's up to chance or luck or everyone else. And that generally leads to learned helplessness and depression and more stress and anxiety because you feel like, why bother trying? I can't do anything anyways, right? So how do you test or assess the social cognitive approach? So I don't know if you remember way back, we talked about Freud in the first Freud one. I talked about projective tests. I talked about the ink blot and the TAT, and I said we're going to come back to it. So we will come back to it, and we'll come back to this too. But I just want you to know that the way that they would assess your cognitive social personality would be by watching you. They would give you some sort of environmental test and see how you behave and then use that. Okay, the humanistic perspective kind of changes what Freud said because they really focus on the human potential, the good side of humans, right? Not the id, the nasty, the devil side, okay? They focus on self-awareness and free will, and the key idea here is that your personality is shaped by your drive to be the best that you can be, right? So it's really 100% you wanting to do the best that you can, and then you develop a perception of yourself based on that. So there is a little bit of a cognitive, point here that you're thinking about yourself, your perception of yourself, but humanistic doesn't focus on the environment so much, okay? Abraham Maslow, Carl Rogers, right? Okay. So we already talked about this, right? One of the major guys, Abraham Maslow, we talked about the hierarchy of needs, we talked about motivation. Again, they feel like it's also important in your personality. So based on what level of needs you're currently being met, that could shape your personality, right? So if you need the safety and security being met, you might be more fearful, more aggressive, where if you need the self-esteem being met, you might be more outgoing, right? So it could definitely matter. Ultimately, though, all humans want to reach the top, and these are some of the different criteria that you need in order to reach that top, okay? You don't need to know all these criteria, but I think it's kind of interesting, and he really only believes that 1% of people tend to ever reach the top of the triangle, okay? All right, Carl Rogers is really, although, Maslow was important in humanism, Carl Rogers is really the big guy in humanism. And remember how when Freud talked about the id, right, that was what drove you, right? It was that libido. So Carl Rogers believes that you have something that drives you like the id, but it's positive, and it's called the actualizing tendency. And it's the drive for all humans to be all you can be and to do what's best for yourself. It's like that army slogan, be all you can be. So he believes that this leads us to develop a self-concept, right? Because we want to do the best that we can. We want what's best for ourselves, so we come up with a self-concept. Who am I, right? It's all the thoughts, the feelings, the beliefs that you have about yourself. And it's not just influence about yourself, but influence about the way that people react to you, right? And generally, there's two types of self-concept. You can have a real self and your ideal self. The real self is who you say you are, and the ideal self is who you wish you would be. So if you want to just think for a second, what are 5 words that describe me? Okay, whatever. Then think for a second, what are 5 things that I would like to be, right? So that would be your real self and your ideal self. Now, how do you then, what's better, real, ideal, why does this all matter, okay? So if you grow up in a situation where you feel accepted and loved and valued regardless of who you actually are, doesn't matter if you make a mistake, doesn't matter if you do this, doesn't matter if you want to be a doctor or a musician, right? That's unconditional positive regard, being loved and valued no matter what. You're going to develop a positive self-concept. And this is going to mean that your real self and your ideal self are close. So they're not very far away. So those two parts of your self-image are close together. All right. And if you receive unconditional positive regard, you can accept yourself because you received acceptance from others, and you can work to achieve your full potential and become happy. Right? The opposite of this, of course, is that conditional positive regard. So if you only feel loved and valued if you act a certain way. And this could be if you look a certain way, if you take a certain job, if you get certain grades, it could be anything, right? And of course you want to have people in your life who don't do this. You don't want to have friends who only like you if you drive them around, or you don't want to have parents who you feel only love you if you will be a doctor or something, right? And because this could lead you to feel like a negative self-concept, because you only like yourself if you meet other people's standards, not really your own. So you don't have a very positive self-concept, because who you are and who you think you should be are very, very different, and that's called incongruence. Okay, so if we feel that people will only accept us when we act a certain way, the person who you truly are and the person who you should be are different, and you develop anxiety because you just can't be that way. So how do we test this theory? We use a Q-sort, which is a questionnaire about the real and ideal self, and it like compares the two and kind of scores them. Or a lot of humanistic theorists or humanistic psychologists don't believe in testing, right? They believe it's dehumanizing, and that real conversation and interviews are where you find out about people, and that's where you can have the most change, because then you can give the people the unconditional like love and acceptance that they never had before. All right, so that's all for now, AP Psychos. And remember, psychology is flippin' awesome.